how high will they go? Predictions for winter natural gas prices are climbing. Plus, fewer kids in class, fewer teachers to teach them, more holes in what they know. The changing face of public education after a year and a half of pandemic. But first, the fight against vaccine mandates from unions to the State House. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. Wichita's Machinists Union says it's standing up for thousands of Textron and Spirit Aerosystems employees because the companies won't as a federal COVID vaccine deadline approaches. KAKE's Trent Bennett explains.
It shouldn't be a mandate, it should be a choice.
Cecilia Smith has worked for Spirit Aerosystems for 25 years, and by December 8th, she's been told by her company, get the shot or don't come to work.
What happened to my body, my choice?
Last week, she and hundreds of her co-workers chanted and refused to choose the vaccine over their jobs.
If anything, I think that the companies are using the president as a excuse.
Cornell Beard is the president of the Machinists Union that backs employees like Cecilia Smith. The union sent this letter to Spirit Wednesday saying any aviation manufacturers that force a COVID-19 vaccine will be opposed.
Those that don't want it, I do not think it should be shoved down your throat.
Beard says since thousands of employees have been asked to choose the shot or lose their job, he wants a response to his letter by next week.
If I don't get the responses, I'll file the appropriate charges.
Beard is demanding the companies come up with a long-term solution for both sides, workers who don't want the shot and those who have or will take it.
My intentions are very clear.
And while they await a response, employees like Smith,
A mandate is not a law.
say they will continue to stand with their decision to make their own choice.
Meanwhile, a new state commission from the Kansas House and Senate is preparing to meet to look into possible government overreach and the impact of the vaccine mandates on Kansas. Formed by Republican leadership at the State House, the governor is now urging Democrats to participate in the deliberations, saying, quote, I believe when you are offered a seat at the table, you ought to take it because you ought to be there to at least see what's going on. And here to discuss this and much more today, we're joined by State Senator Ethan Corson, a Democrat from Prairie Village, a newcomer to the show. Also a newcomer to the show, we have State Representative Paul Wagner, Republican from Hutchinson. And Paul, since you're right here with me on the set, we're going to start there. Okay. What are Republicans hoping to see out of this new commission?
Well, you know, I think part of it is simply to have some factual information and to see what really can be done. What is pushing these mandates, of course, is the Biden administration has been using as kind of a bully pulpit. And as far as some of how companies have been responding, I mean, arguably it's been very heavy-handed. In my area, we hear a lot of feedback from people who work for Pfizer and McPherson, and people are very. This notion of losing your job over the vaccine mandate is very disturbing to people and highly threatening. And they really want a solution better than what the company seems to be offering right now.
And Ethan, as we talk about this new commission looking at the mandate and potential government overreach, what are Democrats expecting to see out of this or hoping to see out of it?
I think it's really important for everybody to realize that we do not have a vaccine mandate in Kansas. That's not something that the governor or anybody has really expressed an interest in. What we're talking about is federal policy, and it's also worth noting that we don't even yet have the final regulations from the federal government. So I think that we maybe need to take a step back, wait till we get these regulations, understand what's in them. I'm sure that there will be no shortage of state attorney generals who are going to look to see if there are legal challenges to be made and would be interested in making them. I think we should let that process play out. I am glad that Democrats are participating in the committees. I'm just not convinced that there's any real thing to be gained yet at this point by having these committees. I don't think that necessarily we have real expertise in what is or is not constitutional. So I think that probably a better avenue would be to see what is in the regulations, see what, if any, legal challenges are made to them, and then see what comes from them through our court system.
And Ethan, Paul made the point about hearing from constituents who are very concerned about the president's executive order. What about you? What are you hearing from your voters?
You know, from my constituents, really what I'm hearing about a lot of is, frankly, is COVID fatigue and a lot of frustration with folks who feel like they have done for 18 months now, really what's been asked of them as far as trying to take precautions for public health and safety, as far as mask wearing, getting the vaccine, which is an FDA approved vaccine that we know is safe and effective. And I think there is some frustration among those folks towards those who have seemingly taken the stance that they're not going to apply, they're not going to practice public health safety, and continue to be a drag on our economy and really are preventing us from getting out of this. I think if I were going to sum up what I'm hearing, there's a sense from folks of, let's get the show on the road. We want to get out of this. And we know that the way of get out of the pandemic is to get folks vaccinated. And so I think that in my district, I'm hearing a lot of is, let's get this on the road. Let's get folks vaccinated so we can get back to normal, which is a shared goal of all Kansans.
Pilar, I would really speak to that as far as the point really is people, they have to be convinced that this is something that they want to do. And from just a business standpoint, I mean, again, I'm a business owner, that the difference for a company, I mean, where you would have, whether you have 90% of your employees vaccinated or 100%, I don't see where there is the vested interest of the company to force 100%. I mean, all you're doing is inviting lawsuits. The companies are some of the companies at least seem to be very reluctant to offer any sort of religious accommodations for people who have a philosophical perspective against this. Plus also, you have tons of people, I mean, over half of Kansans have some sort of natural immunity because they've already had the COVID. Pfizer, for one, is not making any accommodation for that. And I would think these private businesses, if they had any real sense about it, that they would go out of their way to accommodate their employees. I mean, they're loyal employees who they're basically going to show the door to. Plus also Ethan's comment, you do have to be aware that some of these companies have like a November 15th deadline when they're going to start doing this. And so the committee, I know from the Republicans in general, it's like if the committee has some way forward that we can actually do something positive, that people would be very happy to go to a special session, in November, or to, at the very least, have this the very top thing we do in January when we're back in Topeka.
All right, we're going to keep an eye on that and see what comes out of all that. Meanwhile, a rise in crime across Kansas is adding to an already stressed court backlog. Other states say they expect courts to need months to bring criminal cases back up to date. In Kansas, it's hitting judges, prosecutors, and people waiting to hear back on their cases. Rebecca Chung with the KSN Capitol Bureau takes a look at what we can expect.
At the Capitol, there have been efforts to speed things up, to get things moving again. But the reality of the situation is that the courts are backed up. It's not looking good for people waiting for trial. It's taking much longer for their cases to be heard. And I'm told that with this rise in crime, well, it's only going to make things worse. A mounting backlog of cases during the pandemic is putting a hold on people coming to trial, especially now with the rise in violent crime in the U.S.
I'm not sure whether ultimately we'll see a greater number of cases filed this year than we have in previous.
The latest FBI figures reporting a more than 5% increase in violent crimes in 2020. And in Kansas, the number of murders for that year skyrocketed, rising more than 48%, the highest increase in nearly 3 decades. It's impacting prosecutors, judges, and those waiting to hear back on their case, the wait far exceeding times before the pandemic.
You could wait at least 5 months for an in-custody case to get to trial. Now, a lot of things are getting set much further down the road.
Right now, judges in Shawnee County courts are dealing with about 250 cases each. While state lawmakers push to speed up trials for violent crimes, for many, it's a waiting game.
A person who remains in jail for any significant period of time runs the risk of losing their job, fraying their family relationships.
And it really has been a tough time during the pandemic, especially for the court system. And what I'm told is that with Shawnee County courts, it's going to take at least 1 to 2 years to really get through the court dockets to clear up the caseload. At the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chung.
And Ethan, I know I've spoken with some district court judges who have told me they're very concerned that as we move forward because of this backlog, there may be some cases that end up being dismissed, whether they should be or not, because we violated the speedy trial rights that are enshrined in our Constitution.
This is a really difficult issue. We wrestled with this. I'm a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We wrestled with this issue, and I think that we really dealt with it in a really constructive, bipartisan way. We have some members of that committee very conservative. We have other members who are less, more moderate members, and we came together on a compromise. The initial proposal that came to us was to suspend the statutory speedy trial until May 1st of 2024. We were able to compromise on May 1st of 2023. This is a problem that there is unfortunately not an easy answer to. What you're trying to do is you're trying to balance two competing constitutional rights: the right to a speedy trial and then the right of a defendant to confront their accuser. We went through a period where we weren't able to have in-person jury trials because of concerns for the health and safety for all of those involved. That has left us with this backlog. I'm really appreciative of the work of prosecutors, public defenders, defense attorneys, judges, and court personnel who are going above and beyond to try to address this. We will be getting a report. The Judiciary Committee will be receiving a report in January that will let us know how we are doing in each of our 31 judicial districts in addressing this backlog. And at that point, I think we can see what, if any, actions the legislature can take to try to help mitigate this. But it is a very challenging issue, and unfortunately there's not an easy, ready, out-of-the-box solution.
And Paul, I know as media, I've been hearing from folks at all levels who are involved in these backed up cases. What are you hearing?
Actually, I was talking to some people from the district attorney office in Reno County, and they were, commenting how this is ongoing. It's when it's going to get better is not really clear. There's been a lot of concern about some of the bigger counties in Kansas that actually have like murder cases that are not being heard, and you would think capital offenses of anything should be heard. There's not an easy solution. It's just going to take some time, but we did act in a across the board bipartisan way, and it I think met everybody's sense as to what's the best way to proceed.
Yeah. Do you see any changes being needed, or is it just kind of let's get through this next year and then decide as we're coming up on that deadline?
There was also a bill in the Budget Committee as far as there's been a problem with the courts as far as being able to staff people because of just how super tight their budgets have been. To be able to hire more people should help facilitate this, I think, some. But again, as Senator Corson said, that it's like 2023 is when the bill that we passed would actually expire. So we're giving ourselves another 18 months to make this happen.
All right. Well, 18 months to figure it out. We'll see if the courts can do it or not.
Hope so.
We know the pandemic had some pretty big effects on public education in Kansas. The federal government sent state schools nearly $1.5 billion to help navigate those changes, $15 million being distributed by the State Board of Education this last week. We go back to KSN's Rebecca Chung for a look at some of the setbacks schools are facing.
What we're hearing is that a lot of those dollars are going out to helping schools recover from the pandemic and also to dealing with learning loss. Now, this has been an issue for many students falling behind due to remote learning. Now we have lawmakers and education leaders meeting here at the Capitol to go over the latest numbers on where that money is being spent. Now, the state received about $831 million in emergency relief money earlier this year, about 90% of that going directly to school districts for tools to help prepare and respond to the virus. But the last 10% has been set aside by the state. We now know half of those remaining dollars going to training teachers to support students in reading and math to help them catch up. And I'm told that this is going to be a big focus for next year. Lawmakers are going to be looking into where this money is being spent in schools and looking for improvements in these areas. But there could be issues that come up.
I think it's very likely that some of the academic measures, test scores, ACT scores, they're going to be down despite more money, because even with additional funding, this tremendous event that affects students and learning took place.
Now, just about a month ago, a special legislative committee was formed to look into where this money is going. And that committee has not started meeting yet, but we will keep you posted as they get to work and look into where the money is being distributed. At the Capitol, I'm Rebecca Chong.
Now, I know that there has been, over the last year and a half, some, we'll call it tension between the legislature and the State Board of Education over who should be doing what in this situation. What role do lawmakers see themselves taking as we start to try and crawl out of this pandemic hole?
You know, I think a lot of what you see in the legislature has been, because the funding issues in general have been set by the courts, that it's been a lot of the policy issues as far as on just standards, whether they be like civics education came up, questions about girls' sports, I mean, just all sorts of things that would be not typical topics, but they really have come up simply because the funding's off the table. I would throw in that this $1.4 billion, I mean, the total state budget, or the total education budget, is just over like $8 billion. I mean, this is like a 15 or 20% increase. And I think it's no wonder that legislators really want to see where the money's going, because, I mean, how much COVID-related costs were there actually for public schools? And you just don't want to see the money kind of frittered away on things that don't matter.
No. Ethan, what about you? What role do you see lawmakers playing in climbing out of this hole?
Well, I would say that I think it is really important that these decisions primarily be made by our elected State Board of Education and by our elected local school boards in our various school districts. These are the folks that really have the relevant expertise, and these are the folks who are accountable to the voters that elected them. Just as the representative and I were elected, our state school board members were elected, our local school board members were elected. I think primarily they should be the decision makers in how, when, where these funds get spent. I also want to point out, though, that what we're seeing in Kansas, it is definitely something that is important and that we need to try to improve. But Kansas is consistent with national trends. We are not an outlier. There was a report by ACT, who administers that college admissions test. They said that COVID-19 has had the single biggest impact on education of any event since they've started administering the test. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. These additional resources will be helpful, but there was still some good news in that report. We had more teachers stay in the same district in the most recent school year, more new graduates coming to Kansas, more new teachers coming to Kansas than are leaving to go to other states. We had fewer retirements than expected. So there is not a more important issue than making sure that our children are getting every opportunity to learn and to succeed and to develop to their full potential. I just am cautious about the legislature overreaching into areas that are better left by folks at the state board and our local districts that really have the deep expertise in these issues.
And I know you mentioned more teachers staying. All of this, of course, happening as the state is facing a 63% increase in teacher vacancies this year over last year. That's a big number.
Indeed. I mean, partly there's a general across the board. Companies are having a hard time hiring people, and so. But this vacancy ratio is something that is a big concern.
Yeah.
In-person learning is what you want. I mean, so you really need teachers in the classroom, and that's the goal, I think, of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I've been reporting on teacher shortages for years, and it seems like the extreme shortages they were predicting we're starting to see those now. So it'll be a while till we can fill some of those positions, I think. All right. Well, a new report out this week shows that natural gas prices are still on the rise and probably will continue to rise as we go into the winter. What does that mean for you? KAKE's Hannah Baker takes a look.
It's multiple things, one thing after another.
Alyssa Jackson was shocked when she heard her natural gas bill could be significantly higher this winter, especially being a parent and new homeowner.
Some of us cannot afford it, and some of us might end up getting our bills shut off because of that.
And she wasn't the only one surprised by the news.
I think it's going to hurt a lot of people who are on fixed incomes, and I think nearly everybody's on a fixed income of some sort.
That's terrible. I don't understand why. I mean, on a fixed income, that's a big deal.
According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, households could spend 54% more for propane, 43% more for home heating oil, and 30% more for natural gas compared to last winter. With data pointing at the overall low inventory levels and continued demand for natural gas generation for the uptick in prices. And locally, the Kansas News Service reports Kansas Gas Service and Black Hills Energy customers are already paying more for October. But this winter could see a monthly increase as much as $100 higher a month than last year. As for consumers like Jackson, she and other Kansans will have to see what happens.
Yeah, we're getting these pandemic reliefs and everything, but I mean, for us who have kids and bills and stuff, it's kind of hard to even think about paying an extra $100.
And all of this coming on the heels of last February's price spikes. Ethan, there was some aid that the legislature passed for cities, school boards, small businesses even. What about individuals? Any help coming their way?
Yeah, so I think this is an issue we need to look at both from a short-term and long-term perspective. In the short term, I would encourage, we have a SPARK committee. That is the committee in the legislature that is determining where federal COVID-19 relief money should go. I would encourage them to look at what we can do to assist those individuals who are in need of help with paying their heating bills. I think that would be a really, really good use of some of this federal money that we have coming into the state to making sure that folks are able to keep their heat on and providing assistance to those individuals. We also, through the Department of Children and Families, we administer a program called the Low Income Energy Assistance Program. This is a federally funded program that helps folks pay a portion of their energy costs. I have been encouraging all my constituents and would encourage all of your viewers to go to the Department for Children and Families website to see if they qualify. That's the short term. In the long term, we know that we need more energy to meet demand. Kansas is really well positioned to be a leader in clean, renewable energy. I think the legislature needs to focus on promoting policies that would expand growth in areas like wind and solar here in Kansas. This could be a huge win-win for Kansas in terms of both increasing our energy supply, lowering rates for consumers, while creating new good-paying jobs.
All right. And Paul, what are your thoughts on this?
I take a very different tact from what Ethan said. I mean, a lot of the problem has been is that the Biden administration and sort of their war on fossil fuels. I mean, the Green New Deal and some of that, they're intentionally reducing the number of leases that you can have to drill for oil. They're pressuring banks not to lend money to the oil and gas industry. I mean, the fact that gas prices a year ago were, $2 a gallon, and now we're hitting $3 a gallon, it's not a dramatic problem with demand spiking, but it's supply being choked off, and that's through governmental policies. And I don't think we should accommodate ourselves. I mean, it's in the short term, it's nice. Spark money to go to help people, could be a short-term solution. But the real problem is the fact that oil should not be $80, $100 a gallon, or a barrel, but it should be down at $40 or $50 like it was a year ago.
Case of not much Kansas can do because we're talking about federal issues going on there.
It's true, but we have federal legislators that can
for a reason.
Have a vote.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, finally today, Wichita this week passed a non-discrimination ordinance after months of often highly emotional debate. It's an ordinance many are calling the strongest of its kind in the state. KAKE's Jackson Overstreet breaks it down for us.
After more than 4 hours of public comment and debate on Tuesday,
will the people here today that are in opposition to this ordinance stand up right now?
I ask from the bottom of my heart for you to move forward and protect your citizens of Wichita.
The Wichita City Council passed its non-discrimination ordinance 6-1. The NDO shields those in certain protected classes from discrimination in public accommodations, housing, and employment. It went through a lengthy review process by the city's Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board before today.
By having a local option for that resolution, particularly one that heavily relies on mediation, it allows us to really get those resolutions for folks who might otherwise not be able to afford justice.
The lone no vote was councilperson Jeff Blubaugh. He says his voters did not support the measure, and he thought it wasn't needed with state and federal protections already in place.
Discrimination is something no one should be doing, but I believe it should be done at a different level than the city of Wichita. We have so many other things we could do.
With the NDO passed, those who support it says the real work starts now, trying to educate the public more so the ordinance is not seen as divisive but as needed protections.
We're not talking about violating anyone's religious freedoms. We're talking about treating people equally and fairly in businesses, public accommodations, housing, things like that.
Now, this is a Wichita ordinance, but you know, we've seen other local ordinances end up impacting state law in the long term. No smoking in restaurants, Sunday sales of alcohol, that sort of thing. Is this the kind of ordinance that maybe has the potential to spread?
Actually, I don't think, certainly not currently in Topeka, just simply because these types of bills have been most commonly passed in states that have Democrat majorities. Republicans are much more conversant with protecting private industry, private businesses, religious groups and such, that the effect of the non-discrimination ordinance, such as it is not going to be something I think is going to go over well in a Republican-dominated legislature.
All right. Ethan, what about you? What do you think about all this?
You know, I really applaud Wichita for taking this important step to protect all of the residents. What I think is really noteworthy is that both the Wichita Chamber of Commerce and Cargill, a major employer, both of them testified in support of the ordinance, and they said that it would help with recruiting and retaining talented, diverse employees. This is really a pro-business policy. If you zoom out a little bit, a huge challenge we have as a state is that we continue to lose too many of our talented young people. One reason is that when you don't have these sorts of protections in place, when we seem hostile towards certain groups of folks, we drive people away. And at a time we desperately need a talented and diverse workforce. So having an NDO in place in our cities, in our state's largest city, it's a real message to young people that we want them to build a life in Kansas. We want them to become the next generation of engineers, nurses, teachers, and business owners.
All right, Ethan, we're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Paul, both for joining me this week. We'd also like to thank our news partners at Cake News, KSN News, and the Wichita Eagle for sharing their materials with us. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Stay safe and have a great week.